from 264 to 146 BCE, Rome gained 2 territories, right? Someone tell me one of them. Yeah. Macedonia is right, and what's the other one? Spain. So you can see on the map, in purple is 264, and in yellow is 146. So we're going by the 2 yellow places, right? Spain and Macedonia. Okay, so we're going to review what caused the fall of the Republic. So let's set the stage. They go to fight the Carthage Wars, the Punic Wars, and when they come back, the soldiers, what's their life like? Yeah.
They're poor because they lost all their farmland.
They lost all their farmland, they're poor, they're also hungry, angry. Did you say angry? Angry and hungry, right? Say hangry. So they're hungry, they're poor, their farms have been ruined, their crops have dried out. Why did they lose their farms? Yeah.
Because they sold them.
Yeah, but they were also gone, right? So they just kind of, yeah.
They sold.
Yeah, and there was no one to take care of them. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? They left and nobody stepped in to take care of their farms. So when they get back from war, they have spent all their money in the war because they had to buy all of their own, what? Their own gear, their own
Armor and like tools and whatever.
and weapons, yep. And so they have to buy all their own stuff to go fight this war. They get home, their lives are gone, right? They're alive, but their livelihood is gone. They have no land because it's been either ruined by the Hannibal invasion or just fell to pieces because no one's there to take care of it. So they come home, they're hungry, they're poor, they're beaten, and they decide to move into Rome, into the cities looking for work, right? So that's kind of where we're at in Rome right now. At the same time, the patricians and the plebeians are fighting, and they're fighting because the patricians have bought this land up and promised jobs to these soldiers, and then they get in the cities and there's no jobs, there's no food. So what happens when you come home, you go to a city looking for work, there is no work to be had, so now you're poor, hungry, and the country and the community is kind of falling apart. What rises, what starts to happen? Yeah.
You start to get like angry that as soon as you leave, all of this starts happening.
Yep, so poverty and unemployment are rising, which leads to crime rising, right? I skipped over vetoes, and I'm sorry, I meant to do that. So remember Tiberius, we watched a video about him and his brother yesterday? So he's vetoing all of these laws that are important for, based on personal reasons. He wanted his laws to pass first, so he vetoed any law anybody else proposed until his passed, or because he personally didn't like someone. So that leads to discourse between the patricians and the plebeians as well. So that is happening, unemployment is rising, poverty is rising, and therefore, what is happening, else is rising?
More people like trying to come in and save people.
Yeah, so population, people are coming into the city, but it's all causing crime to rise. And on top of that, they don't trust the police. They don't trust the officials because the officials are being bribed by higher ups to do what those people want and not what's best for the common people, the people who are suffering because of the war that they just started. So private armies become a thing. And private armies, does someone know what that means? After they get back and they move into these cities and they're working, they're not going to go willingly to another war. So how are militaries put together after this? They're bought. It's bought, right? So they're paying for armies, and that's what private armies are. And this all leads to the rise of Julius Caesar. Okay? So Julius Caesar calls himself a lifelong dictator. And we're going to watch a video about that and answer some questions. So remember what we do when we watch a video? Chromebooks closed, level 0. Okay.
fall of the Roman Republic. Rome's armies were victorious wherever they went, yet problems were building at home. Dishonest officials stole money, and the gap between rich and poor was growing. Thousands of farmers faced ruin, and the cities were becoming overcrowded and dangerous. At this point, most of the people who ruled Rome were patricians, rich people who owned large farms. These rich landowners ran the Senate and held the most powerful government jobs. They handled Rome's finances and directed its wars. Despite some gains for the plebeians, many people became very unhappy about the situation. These rich landowners used a new source of labor, the thousands of prisoners brought to Italy during the wars. By using these enslaved people to tend their crops, wealthy Romans could force owners of small farms out of business and debt. Why? Many of them had been able to farm because they were fighting in Rome's wars. Others had suffered damage to their farms during Hannibal's invasion of Italy. Moreover, small farmers could not compete with wealthy Romans who were buying up land to create latifundia, or large farming estates. Faced with debts they could not pay off, many farmers sold their land.
Okay, so we skipped over one. So what is a latifundia? Funny word, huh? Yes.
A large farmland.
Yep, so it says right there they created large farming estates. But who runs these latifundias? Yes.
Very rich people.
Right. And who's physically working on these farms? Like, who do they pay to work? Yeah, go ahead, Owen.
Poor people.
Poor people. Slaves, too, right? So the soldiers that fought in the Punic Wars bring back slaves that they won battles, bring back slaves, and the patricians are paying or forcing these slaves to work on these latifundias.
Estates. Faced with debts they could not pay off, many farmers sold their land and headed to the cities, desperate for work. However, jobs were hard to find. Enslaved people did most of the work. If free men were lucky enough to be hired, they earned low wages. These conditions created widespread anger. Roman politicians were worried about riots breaking out, but they quickly turned the situation to their advantage. To win the votes of the poor, they began providing cheap food and entertainment. This policy of bread and circuses helped many dishonest rulers come to power. However, things only got worse. The Roman army took on a new role. Until now, the army had mostly stayed out of governmental affairs. Things changed when a military leader named Marius became consul in 107 BC. Previously, most soldiers were owners of small farms. Now, because this type of farmer was disappearing, Marius began to recruit soldiers from the poor. In return for their service, he paid them wages and promised them the one thing they desperately wanted: land. Marius's new military system led to new power struggles. It was not long before Marius faced a challenge from a rival general with his own army, a man named Sulla. In 82 BC,
Okay, so Marius. What change did Marius make to the Roman army? Someone that hasn't answered a question, tell me. You just learned about it. Yeah,
He gave land to the poor.
right. So they promised land to slaves. In exchange for what, though?
Money.
Yep, for them to join the army. So basically, instead of paying them money, he's paying them in land, right? And that's a big, big thing that changes, and it kind of leads to a domino effect.
Sulla drove his enemies out of Rome and made himself dictator. Over the next 3 years, Sulla changed the government. He weakened the Council of Plebes and strengthened the Senate. Then he stepped down from office. He hoped that the Roman Republic could heal its wounds and recapture its glory. Instead, Rome plunged into an era of civil wars for the next 50 years. Ambitious men saw how Sulla used an army to seize power. They decided to follow the same path. After Sulla left office, different Roman leaders battled for power, supported by their loyal armies. In 60 BC, 3 men were on top: Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar. Crassus was a military leader and one of the richest men in Rome. Pompey and Caesar were not as rich, but both were successful military men. Drawing on their wealth and power, they formed the first triumvirate to rule Rome. The members of the triumvirate each had a military command in a remote area of the Republic. Pompey was in Spain, Crassus in Syria, and
Okay, so what is a triumvirate? Another hard word to say. Yeah.
It's this deal where you make a list that you have to make each one have some power.
Right, so it's an alliance of three powerful men. I think they said it was money, power, and status, I think. That's what they said. Triumvirate, yes, very good. Tri means three, so triumvirate, three, it's a political alliance between three people. Does anyone remember or recall what they said the first triumvirate, who three were in that? What three people? Yeah,
That was Julius Caesar.
okay. What else? Someone who has an answer, tell me. So Julius Caesar, there's two more.
Of what again?
The three people that were in the first triumvirate. So Julius Caesar's one, and then there's two more. Okay, go ahead, tell me. Pompey, and one more. Anyone remember? I'll give you a hint, start with a C. Okay, Crassus, right? Crassus, Crassus. And this is where they're telling you where each of these three owned land.
Caesar in Gaul, which is in modern-day France. While in Gaul, Caesar battled foreign tribes and invaded Britain. He became a hero to Rome's lower classes. Senators and others back home in Rome feared that Caesar was becoming too popular and might seize power like Sulla. After Crassus was killed in battle in 53 BC, the Senate decided that Pompey should return to Italy and rule alone. In 49 BC, the Senate ordered Caesar to give up his army and come home. Caesar faced a difficult choice. He could evade the Senate and perhaps face prison or death at the hands of his rivals, or he could march on Rome with his army and risk a civil war. Caesar decided to hold on to his 5,000 loyal soldiers. He marched into Italy by crossing the Rubicon, a small river by the southern boundary of his command area. By doing so, Caesar knew that he was starting a civil war and there was no turning back. The phrase crossing the Rubicon is used today to mean making a decision that you cannot take back. Pompey decided to stop Caesar, but Caesar was the better general. He drove Pompey's forces from Italy and then destroyed Pompey's army in Greece in 48 BC. In 44 BC, Caesar had himself declared dictator of Rome for life. This broke with the Roman tradition and allowed dictators to hold power for only short periods of time. To strengthen his hold on power, Caesar filled the Senate with new members who were loyal to him. At the same time, Caesar knew that reforms were needed. He granted citizenship to people living in Rome's territories outside the Italian peninsula. He started new colonies, provided land for the landless, and created work for Rome's jobless people. He ordered landowners using slave labor to hire more free workers. These measures made Caesar popular with Rome's poor. While many Romans supported Caesar, others did not. His supporters believed that he was a strong leader who brought peace and order to Rome. His enemies, however, feared that Caesar wanted to be king. These opponents, led by the senators Brutus and Cassius, plotted to kill him. Caesar ignored a famous warning to beware the Ides of March, March 15th. On that date, in 44 BC, Caesar's enemies surrounded and stabbed him to death. As a result, several civil wars broke out, and the Republic soon crumbled after that. Now that you have learned about the fall of the Roman Republic, answer these 5 following.
Okay, so why was Julius Caesar so popular amongst the poor? There's a few answers here. Yes. Because I'm sorry. Yes, but he gave them a few different options and a few things that others hadn't, right? So the Civil War is how he took control, and it's what happened after he killed him. But why did the poor like him so much? Yes. Gave him jobs. What else did he give them?
Land.
Land, right? So he was expanding territory and giving poor workers that were not slaves but free men land, and telling the landowners that owned these farms to replace the slaves with free workers so that his citizens could earn money and a living. What else did he give the poor? Yes.
Citizenship?
Citizenship. That's a really big deal. He people who didn't live in Rome were able to be considered Roman citizens. And he also gave them something that we kind of started the day with, food. Remember we talked about food was a big driving factor. It's kind of what led to all the crime because crops were dead. Okay, now why did Brutus, Cassius, and others kill Julius Caesar? Yes. Yeah. So she said they were afraid that he was gonna become like a king. Right? Is that what you were trying to get at? So they were afraid he was trying to make himself into a king. He was becoming too powerful for their liking. And it's also important to note that people liked him. Miss Elliott said this earlier, and I think it's a good time to talk about it. People would rather be safe than free. Does that make sense to y'all? Do you know what we mean by that?
Yes.
So Julius Caesar was a dictator. They had a republic. They had a democratic-esque government style and elected officials. But Julius Caesar became a dictator. So he was a lifelong dictator too. How long can you be a consul for? Someone else. You've answered a lot. Yeah.
1 year.
1 year. And a dictator, you can be a dictator, I think it's defined as long as needed, right? A short period of time, it says in this video. But he named himself a lifelong dictator. So that was a problem. And people liked him, and they wanted to be safe. They were hungry, they were poor, so they chose to accept this dictator rather than be unsafe and be at risk of hunger and of danger and crime and death. So historians believe the fall of the Roman Republic started in 59 BCE when Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus formed an alliance to rule Rome. And we learned about what was that alliance called? Starts with a T. Yes.
The
Triumvirate. It's a tough word. Yeah, but you got it. So those three men were called the first triumvirate. So tri-3. Once Rome had a dictator for life, it was difficult to go back to the republic. So Julius Caesar, we're going to learn a lot about him when we come back from spring break, but we're going to just introduce to him. When I start this video, I'll stop it. So military leaders attempted to gain power for themselves by making promises to poor farmers, and the Roman Republic began to fall apart. So promises like land, food, power. One such attempt was made by Julius Caesar in the first triumvirate, made up of Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey. You can go ahead.